If you're one of the over 130 million people working either an hourly or a salaried job in the United States, then your employer is required by federal law to issue you an IRS Form W2 each year. Now, understanding what is in your Form W2 is crucial to being able to file your taxes correctly on both the federal and the state level. I'm Bradford with the Paying Attention State of Personal Finance. And in this video, I'm going to go through the IRS Form W2 line by line and help you understand what exactly each section means, and if you have further questions, where you can look to get those answered. Now let's jump into it. So here we have the entire IRS Form W2, and this is what your employer is going to use to fill out and then issue to you. So this document here is actually 11 pages in length, but the one that you should expect to receive from your employer is only going to be 2 pages, and that's giving the information that you require to actually file your taxes. So the first part here is just some general guidelines for the employer on how they actually fill it out. This next section is going to be a template that shows what the IRS Form W2 looks like. And then the next page is where we actually get to the fillable form that your employer is going to use to issue you your W2, as well as send a copy off to the IRS. So going through here from beginning to end, in section A, you're going to have the employee social security number, which you provide to your employer. Then B is going to be your employer identification number, and this is effectively a social security number equivalent for your employer's business and is what the IRS uses to identify them. Now the next section here is going to be C. That's going to be employer's name, address, and zip code. For this one, it is Crockett Manufacturing, 300 Alamo Plaza, San Antonio, Texas, 78205. Section D is going to be a control number, and that's not going to be applicable for the vast majority of people. Now the next section E, this is your personal information. So for this one, it's going to be John Smith, who lives at 123 East Market Street, San Antonio, Texas, 78205. Now moving away from the alphabetic to the numeric section of the form, we're going to go up to 1. And for most people, section 1, 3, and 5 are all going to have the same number. So John Smith, for the last calendar year, earned $52,130.63. Now, the reason that you might see a different number for boxes 1, 3, and 5, the most common one that comes to mind is if you serve in the military and you go to a combat tax exclusion zone and you're getting tax-free pay. You're going to see a lower number in section 1 than what you see in sections 3 and 5, which should always be the same number. Now going over to section 2, that's going to be the federal income tax that was withheld for the previous calendar year. Now this is the money that you would have seen on your pay stubs that your employer was withholding from your paycheck, and they were paying off to the federal government on a quarterly basis on your behalf. Now the next sections of 4 and 6, the Social Security tax withheld, as well as the Medicare tax withheld, these are collectively known as the FICA taxes. Social Security tax is going to be taxed at a rate of 6.2% that you pay, and then your employer pays the other half for a total of 12.4%. And then for the Medicare tax withheld, this is taxed at a rate of 1.45%, which is split again between you and your employer for a total of 2.9%. Now, once you get through those, you're going to get to sections 7 and 8, and these are going to be Social Security tips as well as allocated tips. Now, if you don't work a job where you earn tips, you can skip right past these boxes because there shouldn't be anything in there. And the reason we have these boxes is because compared to a regular salary or an hourly income, your employer does not withhold taxes based on your tip amount. And you are responsible, per the IRS's guidelines, to accurately report the total amount of tips that you have. And then once you enter that information, once you actually go and file your taxes, you're going to be able to pay not just your federal income tax, but as well as those FICA taxes that I mentioned earlier, which you have not already paid because your employer is not withholding those taxes on your behalf throughout the calendar year. And then moving ahead, box 9 is empty. I'm anticipating this is going to be used for future use if the IRS figures out something else to use for it. 10 is going to be dependent care benefits. These are going to be things like childcare that is provided from your business to you on your behalf. Again, I wouldn't imagine that most people have something to put in this box, so you can just skip on down to 11, which is going to be non-qualified plans. And there is a nice description on the next page that I'm going to hit in just a moment that walks you through exactly what a non-qualified plan is considered to be. And then going from 11 into 12A, B, C, and D. And these are going to be various letter codes that are going to be associated with various contributions that you might have had throughout the calendar year. So for this one, a double A in the amount of $5,200. This means John Smith contributed $5,200 from the tax year 2022 towards his eligible Roth 401k. And then another way of indicating that is going to be in box 13, where it says that yes, this was part of your retirement plan contribution. Now for boxes 12A through D, you could have multiple codes, and I'm going to cover that in just a moment when we get to that instructions page. Now for box 14, that is going to be other, and those are going to be for other entitlements or other deductions that the employer needs to indicate on your W-2. Now going from there into step 15, this is going to be the state where you reside, where you're going to be paying state income tax. Or in the case of this one, where I use Texas, there is no state income tax, but the employer might still be based out of that state. So for this one, again, I just generated an arbitrary number. And so the EIN for this state is going to be 123456789. Now, if you do live in a state that does collect an income tax, as well as a locality, say a county that collects a local income tax, this information is going to be reflected here. And this is information that you could potentially use to deduct how much you actually owe on your federal income taxes, because you did already pay some taxes at both the state and local level already. Now, moving from this page, we're going to continue on down here. And a lot of this is actually just replicated throughout this form. And all the information is going to be same on all of these PDF fillable forms. So continuing down here, we're going to get to the notice to employee, and it talks about when you do and when you do not have to file. There's more complete instructions on the actual IRS Form 1040, and that's going to be the general tax form that everybody fills out for their personal income taxes. Now, continuing on down here to some more instructions that I think are a little bit more useful. Again, a replication of the actual W-2. So here's going to be some instructions for the employee, and this lists out nicely what each of these actual boxes actually means. So it goes through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all the way through 14. And then it tells you, hey, in box 12, what is some information that could be listed in here and exactly what do those different codes mean? Now, continuing back on here, it's going to give another generation of the W-2, and then we're going to get to some more instructions for the employee. And this is where it's going to tell you what do all of these different things that could be in box 12 actually mean, as well as some instructions for box 13 and box 14. Some of the more common things that you might see on here would be like the double A that I had up earlier, and that's going to be a designated Roth contributions under a 401k plan. Or if you work for a different employer and you have a 403b plan, you could expect to see a double B. Now, these are all codes that I'm talking from some of my friends. You might not necessarily know what they are, but they are all listed here. So if you see a code, make sure it makes sense to you and the sort of pay and also benefits that you received from the previous tax year. So this is a nice section right here. And then just finishing out what the W-2 has, it's going to have some instructions for employers at the very bottom of here. And it just basically says when you're required to furnish the W-2 to both the IRS and your employees, as well as some other tax deadlines that your employer needs to worry about, not necessarily something that you need to be worried about. Now, what should you do if the W-2 that you receive is wrong, or you just flat out never receive one from your employer in the first place? Well, the first step for what you should do is just basically on the lowest level, go and talk to your employer, whether that's through a finance department or for an HR department. Go and talk to them, let them know the issue that you didn't receive a W-2, or if you did and it was incorrect, specifically what on there that you noticed was incorrect, so that way they can generate you a W-2 corrected or W-2C. Now, if that doesn't really get you anywhere, at the end of February, you don't either have your up-to-date W-2C or the initial W-2 that you never received, you might want to consider filing a complaint with the IRS to be able to get the process moving so you can actually get your W-2 and be able to file your taxes on time. Now, there's two different avenues that the IRS provides to be able to reach out to them. One is through an in-person appointment at an IRS Taxpayer Assistance Center, TAC, or you can try calling the IRS over the phone. And the number for that is going to be 1-800-829-1040. Now, if still nothing has happened after you even talked to your employer, you filed a complaint with the IRS, they've reached out to your employer on your behalf, and you still don't have a W-2, you're still required to file your taxes by the tax deadline of that specific year. For this year, for 2022, you must file your taxes by Monday, April 18th, 2023. But even though you don't have a W-2, you still have to file your taxes anyway. Now, in that situation, you might need to turn and use IRS Form 4852. What this form does is it effectively allows you to estimate what your actual W-2 information should have been by using your most recent pay stub. So it's going to be estimating what was your total pay for the previous year, how much money was withheld for both your federal income taxes, as well as your FICA taxes, and any of the other information from the box 1 through 14, or Alpha through Foxtrot that we already mentioned. Now, the downside to using this alternate IRS form as compared to the W-2 is because a lot of the information is estimates on your part. The IRS does readily admit that it is going to take longer for your actual tax return to be processed, which means that if a refund is due to you, it's going to be severely delayed compared to if your employer had done their job in the first place and issued you your proper W-2 within the time frame that they are required to per the IRS. But once you do have your IRS Form W-2 or 4852 that you filed out, you still have to actually file your taxes. But I don't think there's any reason for anybody to actually have to pay their taxes unless they have a really complicated tax situation. And that's why I recommend that everybody check out the IRS Free File program to see if they qualify to be able to file their taxes with some of the top tax prep softwares completely for free. Now, thanks for watching with me today. And please remember, from your first penny to your first million, we're here to help.